run. So number 5 was records, and you guys got this really well in the question when I asked you. And the biggest thing is to keep them. You know, if you don't know what's happening with your bees, I certainly can't remember, especially if you have multiple hives. So records, the biggest thing is just to try to keep them. You know, that would be a great help for most yards that I've seen, is that you could go back and you can see what your last inspection was, what was going on previously. That can be really helpful for anybody that's coming into your yard to help you out, whether that would be a veterinarian, whether that would be a state inspector. You know, keeping those records can be really helpful. And it can be really helpful for you as you kind of grow and learning about your bees and learning about the biology and learning what worked and what didn't work, what was happening last year. You know, those things can be really helpful. So things I recommend keeping records on, certainly your inspections, and then any procedures or treatments that you do for your hives. And then Varroa. If you're tired of hearing about Varroa, oh well, it's just going to keep going on and on here. So it's something that, you know, you have to address, and you have to have some sort of program for addressing Varroa in your hives. It's really not a question anymore of, do I have Varroa? If you have a hive in the United States, pretty much the answer to that is yes. It's just, what are you doing about it? And then queens. Yep. What's your queen status? What's she doing? Where are you at with that? What's going on with your honey? You need to have a nutritional plan for your hive, particularly what time of year it is and what's going on seasonally and with the weather. And do you need to be feeding? Are you feeding sugar, syrup, pollen? What are you doing? So keeping up with those seasonal records, those are the things that I tend to keep track of. You know, and sometimes your inspections are happening at certain times of the year. It might be once a week. You know, if you're not in there once a week, you're going to miss things. You know, this time of year, you can kind of slack off a little bit because you don't have to look quite as much, but keeping those records and keeping a ID on each hive. If you have more than one hive, you should have a name or a number for that hive. Okay, have a hive, put an ear tag on it or something. Okay, give it a name. And that's something, again, haven't seen real consistently amongst some beekeepers. They have a bunch of hives in a yard and there's no name or number to them. But, you know, that would be in any other agricultural situation just not acceptable. So, you know, every cow or hog has an ear tag or some sort of marking, you know, and maybe the farmer calls her Susie or something of that nature, and you can certainly name your hives, whatever you want to name them, but keeping that, or name your queens, whatever you like to do, but keep some sort of ID hooked up with that hive so you know what you're talking about or what you're talking about. And then tip number six is about personnel. You know, we've already talked about equipment being brought in to the hives, but it's also the people that come in can be a source of biosecurity threats. You know, we don't really want to think of people as being biosecurity threats, certainly not with everything that's going on with COVID, but we can certainly harbor different diseases, and we can bring those in. And one thing you can do in your yards, if it's possible at all, is you can control a little bit what's going on with your hands and with your feet. You know, if you can even scrub your boots off, if you have water or access to water, you can bring a bucket with you and a scrub brush and some soap. Just simple things like that can help out a lot. So you can kind of brush your boots off, clean your boots off, wash your hands between hive inspections or going into a yard. Wearing gloves. I know a lot of beekeepers don't like to wear gloves. I personally, you know, I can go barehanded, but I personally like to wear nitrile gloves for a couple reasons. One is, yeah, they can still sting you through nitrile gloves, but I can tell you they also sting you less through nitrile gloves. And you can change them. Now, if you're not comfortable using nitrile gloves and you don't know how to change them so that they stay hygienic, then, you know, it may not work for you as well. But certainly, if I was going in to inspect a sick hive, I would have gloves on and I would be using them as aseptically as I could. And I would be taking them off and exchanging them in between hives to the best of our ability. That can get hard. Gloves can get hard whenever it's real warm outside. So sometimes we'll double glove, but when you're all sweaty, it can be hard to take them off and put them back on again. but realize they can provide, if they're used properly, some level of biosecurity. And in any other situation besides a bee yard, they would be mandatory. Those types of personal protective equipment and biosecurity protective equipment. One thing I will advise you on for gloves is the leather gloves. You can see them here. They are actually kind of terrible for biosecurity. Certainly they have a use. If you're out handling a bunch of hives and you're taking off supers and you're in a yard of 60 hives and you're throwing them on a truck, yeah, you need some protective equipment for sure. So those are for protective equipment for you more than it is for the bees. So keep in mind, what equipment is used in what situation. When we get to clothing like our veils, our bee suits, gloves, protective equipment for us, they should be kept as clean as possible, because whenever you wear those into one yard and you take them into another yard, yeah, could you be passing things along? Yeah, you could be. And, sometimes that's practical and sometimes it's not, but keeping your veil and your gloves as clean as possible is actually a good thing. I know a lot of beekeepers believe that the dirtier your hive is, the better beekeeper you are. But we also have to consider that, especially for going into other yards, what could you be bringing along with